Claire Short, you've had really, I mean, what sounds like, reading about it, a sort of almost that fairy tale political narrative of being in a very large family, 7 kids, talking a lot about all kinds of things, but including politics, and ending up as a Labour MP. I mean, that's a sort of dream route, really, isn't it?
Yes, I didn't set out to be a Labour MP. My father was a teacher. They were sort of Labour folk. We believed in a fairer society. We were brought up as Catholics, sort of Irish Catholics, with that sort of anti-establishment bent that is in that tradition of Catholicism, and a kind of need for some kind of moral core in your life. I passed the 11 plus, but I was the only one in my class of 48 that did, so I always knew that the girl who sat next to me was better at maths than I was, so I always knew that wasn't a fair system. I went to university and I was amazed that people like us could go to university, because I thought I was going to be a teacher and go to a Catholic teacher training college. So I did political science and lots of moral and political philosophy.
You write about it in fairly idyllic terms. You write about full of happy memories of children skipping, playing rounders, hopscotch cricket and other games, boys and girls playing hard and competing strongly but having endless hours of fun. Was it really as idyllic as that sounds?
Yes, I mean, we played in the street as well. There weren't so many cars, so children played in the street, all these games, and knew each other in the street, therefore the kind of adults sort of knew each other. And then off to school, down the road and around the corner, and there were big classes, and this was a school with quite a lot of poor children. I can remember children with sort of pumps with holes in the bottom of them, and some of those, this was before there was much Commonwealth migration to Birmingham when I was in the infant school. There's kind of white working class people that are so pale, that are just not well nourished. I mean, there was all of that, but at playtime we played and we skipped and we had lots of fun.
Yeah, and of course, as you mentioned earlier on, you went to a Catholic school, and you took your religious commitments very seriously at first, didn't you, as a pupil? You say that if you were good, a teacher would give you a holy picture and you would put it into your prayer book, which conjures up a rather earnest image, perhaps, of a pupil taking that side of things very seriously.
I can't remember when I said all this, but it's true. No, but they used to, and that went true into my secondary school.
Yeah.
I don't know, on feast days, or if you were thought to be good, you'd get some picture of some nice saint. I mean, my school was called St Francis, and I loved St Francis, and his love of animals and fairness and so on. So they'd give you pictures of St Francis and you put them in your prayer book, and that was just our culture. We weren't being sort of earnest or good particularly, we were naughty as well, but that was the way we grew.
Yeah, and I want to come on, obviously you challenged some of this a bit later on, but what do you think, in retrospect, were the good sides of going to a Catholic school and having that kind of education?
I think this is a very complex thing, because it's partly families that organise themselves to select a religious denominational school and get themselves to church every week are probably more organised, and the chances of their children achieving more is probably built into that. But for us, it was part of our identity as well. We were of Irish origin. My mother from potato famine days had been in Birmingham, my father more recently. And I think knowing who you are is a very important part of being a comfortable human being. But we knew we were from Irish Catholic origins. We weren't wealthy, we weren't establishment. We knew that what had been done in Ireland was wrong and what had been done in Africa was wrong.
And yet, even though you had this firmly rooted sense of identity, and at first that was reinforced by going to the school, pretty soon from your teenage period, you challenged some of this stuff. We've got a quote from you again, it's reliable, which I think you probably will remember because it's so fundamental, where you asked you challenged one of your teachers about the existence of God. Now that's presumably, it was quite a big thing to do, for you to be questioning yourself about all the presumptions, presumably, of your upbringing, and then to actually ask teachers about that at a
Well, I think
I
remember that. I might have been 12, 13, something like
13.
that. And I was in my then Catholic girls' grammar school.
Yeah.
And I was beginning to think, can the Pope be right about contraception? It's still entirely theoretical. You know, all those people in India, I don't know why I thought it was about India, not home, but you know, how one does. And then you think, that's not right. And then you think, well, the Pope's not infallible. And in no time at all, you think, well, am I sure that God exists? You know, the young mind. So this teacher was saying to me, there were 6 proofs of the existence of God. And I said, for heaven's sake, what have we been messing about with? Can you tell us?
Did the teacher?
She said, I need to prepare. I'll come back next week. And I found it a bit disappointing because I thought she was just going to come in with the absolute proof. Yeah.
And so from that period, you began to sort of question some of the beliefs that you had up until that point held absolutely firmly. Famously, you were 17 when you got pregnant. You then didn't see the child again.
But that's partly to do with not knowing anything about contraception,
of course. But that's connected, presumably.
Yeah. Well, I think by the time I was 16, I was thinking, I really don't think God exists.
Right.
And I remember my mum sent me off to a trendy American priest, and my dad sat me down and said, remember, Claire, Christianity spread through the Roman Empire as the religion of the slaves because it taught that everyone was equal in the sight of God, which was a very good argument to appeal. Yeah. But so it went on with the normal doubts. And then when I left home at 17 and went to university, I stopped going to Mass. But I went for moral and political philosophy big time. And later on, my commitment to the Labour Party was like finding a new church.
A faith.
Yeah.
I'm told that you're interested again in faith and Catholicism. Is that right?
Well, in a constituency like mine, where all the world's religions are clustered, you go on various days to the synagogue, the mosque, the gurdwaras, because you're invited and you go to show respect. And I find that quite moving, the way in which religion, people have to create their institutions. And it's partly about God in that abstract way, but it's also about how people are socialised, how you celebrate the birth of children, death, marriage. And you see, in a rather moving way, in all these different communities, this search for these meanings. And a lot of the teaching of Sikhism and so on, and the progressive synagogue it chimes with me morally. So that moves me. I think all of this is very good for us. And in this world where politics has become so crass and hubristic and not listening with no humility and losing morality and respect for truthfulness, and the society has become so greedy and consumerist and unequal and unhappy, something speaks to me. I suppose it goes back to my childhood, now talking to you, but we need to find those places where we can be calmer and more reflective about the fundamental goodness of being a human being and the values we have to hold on to.
Returning to your childhood, we've got here a photo of your school year, presumably.
Yes.
We try to work out which one is you. If you could just... can you recognise?
I think this is me, actually.
Oh, right. Okay.
I was pinning my hair up in a French roll that year.
Right. When you see that photo, it's interesting you mentioned something like that. I mean, does it evoke largely fond memories? Do you sort of look back at that period with almost increased affection as the distance grows?
Yes. I left school at 16 and went to a college to do my A-levels because I'd sort of grown out of it and I didn't want to be wearing my boater any longer and all that. But I had a happy time there. We played a lot of serious netball. I loved history and English, and I can still think of some of those teachers and geometry I loved with enormous affection and respect. And I had some very good friends. And it's just on the edge of my constituency, the school. It's now a very good girls' comprehensive Catholic school. And I've been back, and it's, identical to how it was, but much smaller. The hall.
It looks smaller, you mean?
Yes, it's so funny.
Yeah.
You know, this hall where you went for an assembly and that, but it seems tiny.
Do you think it was during the period you were at school you mentioned, or I raised with you, the sort of times when you challenged teachers about Catholicism? Do you think then you became, or always were, someone who would be willing to challenge the orthodoxy of the environment you're in? You did it at a Catholic school. You referred to some of your disappointments with the current Labour Party, which you have famously and publicly challenged. Was it in this time that you acquired that streak, do you think?
Well, I was sort of talk too much. We used to elect the form prefects, and I was often elected the form prefect, but then you kept the order mark book, and I often had more than everyone else. So I was always a bit, feisty and a bit, kind of naturally a bit rebellious, but I always liked everybody. I mean, so my teachers, I might have given them a hard time, but I liked them and they liked me, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's that sort of insider, affectionate rebel, from a turbulent, loving family that I am, really.
Yeah. You're obviously gripped by elements of current affairs from a pretty early age. You've recalled the Suez crisis when you were 10, and explaining to your fellow pupils that NASA was entitled to nationalise the Suez Canal. Now, that's pretty precocious at 10, to be, A, know what's going on, and B, explain it to the other kids.
Well, my dad used to stick up pictures by the wireless, because this was pre-television days. And I can remember this picture of a boy in Hungary, the Russian invasion, crying, and a big tank. And then along came Suez. So we knew that the Russian invasion of Hungary, Daddy didn't give us any lectures. We just knew it was wrong, but we knew that what the Brits and so on were up to in Suez was wrong. So then I was in this class where our form were in the front playground. It was a small playground. And they were all singing, we'll throw NASA in the Suez Canal. And I said, no. And we all gathered round, and I explained to them how, the canal was, and it was in Egypt, and they were entitled to have it. And that's the point about a political household. My father never sat us down and told us this, but he cared about those things. He put up pictures, the news came on the wireless, and we just knew these things.
You, of course, famously went to a school as part of a television documentary as a teacher. What did you feel about it when you were actually in a classroom with kids?
Afterwards I thought having a camera there all the time is nonsense because it distorts everyone's
Sure.
behaviour.
Yeah.
I thought the school was very disorderly in the corridors and so on, in a way that was pretty stunning to me and a bit worrying. The kids were lovely, but this sort of instant ability to create kind of noise and disorder is like the thing that teachers have, and I think the way teachers' authority has been undermined, probably the food that kids eat, and all these things are really very troublesome for schools.
Are you suggesting a discipline? You became more of a disciplinarian as a result of that experience?
I believe absolutely that you have to find in every person, every child, where their talent lies and nurture it so they feel good about themselves, and then they can fly. So it's no good being disciplinarian, hit them, don't mean physically, but squash them down.
Yeah.
That crushes their ability to feel good enough to grow and learn. But you need a certain amount of order in order to be able to relate to children and so on. And if there's this sort of brink of disorder all the time, and therefore keeping order, it gets in the way of the other relationships.
Finally, I get the impression that you feel very passionate about education. Politically speaking, would you have liked, or would you still like to be Education Secretary? Be an international
I would like it in a decent government where the Secretary of State was in charge of the policy. I think one of the tragedies of our situation is, I'm sure Tony believes he's doing good things, but he has these sort of young clever dicks who are never held accountable working for him in Number 10. He doesn't do detail, but he wants to be radical. The departments aren't particularly involved in the development of policy, which means the practitioners are not. So there's this arrogant despising of those who've always been teachers or always been health workers. So I would love to have, those days have gone, being given the opportunity with the extra money coming in to sort of help do what Tim Brighouse did to Birmingham to the whole of our educational system, and have teachers in Britain with such high morale that they were lifting up the achievement. But with this regime, you have to be Ruth Kelly, and I don't want to be Ruth Kelly. I mean, bless her, but...
Okay, Ruth. I was going to say Ruth. Claire Short.
She's a different kind of Catholic as well.
A different kind of Catholic. It must have been the Catholicism. Claire Short, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.